Hi everybody. In this video, I'm going to give you a 9-item checklist that will help you prepare to succeed in difficult conversations. If you take the time to go through this checklist and do the analysis of the situation and the preparation that it requires, I think your chances of being successful in any difficult conversation will be dramatically improved. I'm Bruce Lambert from HowCommunicationWorks.com. Let's get started. So, in my consulting practice, one of the things that I spend a lot of time doing is teaching people how to have very difficult conversations. In my case, these conversations are between health professionals and patients, and I'm teaching the doctors and nurses how to talk to families and patients who have been harmed by healthcare. So these are very, very difficult, intense, highly emotional, high stakes conversations. And the challenge is to do these well. And how can you prepare relatively quickly to do them well? So in preparing and training health professionals to have these conversations, we've developed a set of 10 questions that you can ask yourself as you prepare to go in to have a difficult conversation. And although we designed these questions to help health professionals talk to patients and families, I think they are generally useful for preparing for any difficult conversation. So I want to go through them, all 10 of them, and give you a little bit of commentary on each one and think about how you might use them in a difficult conversation. So the first one may be the most important, and that is to think about what are the goals of the conversation. So often we go into a difficult conversation not thinking clearly about what the goal is. And not surprisingly, if we haven't thought clearly about what the goal is, we don't achieve the goal, or we achieve some other goal. So we might go into a highly emotional conversation, and what we really want is to improve our relationship, or to get someone to grant a request, or to get an apology, or to be given a raise, or have a complaint dealt with, or something like that. That's the kind of pragmatic, practical goal we're going for. But in our mind and in our bodies and our emotions, we have other goals, things like tell them exactly how I feel, or make them feel bad, or hurt them. Now, we don't want to admit that these are our goals, but we're just human beings. And, sometimes we are angry and vengeful and impulsive, and those goals, though the emotions behind them may be legitimate, we have to put those goals aside if we want to achieve the pragmatic goal. So we have to give some thought to what is the goal here. And then if we think clearly about that, then it becomes relatively obvious what we can say to achieve that goal. Sometimes it's hard, even though we know the goal, what the thing is to say to achieve that goal. But often, if we have clarity about the goal, we'll know what to say. And often when we say the wrong thing, it's because we were pursuing the wrong goal. And if we ask ourselves later, did I think saying that thing was going to achieve my goal? We know, of course not. We're not dumb. Even those of us who say we're not great communicators, we're not stupid. So sometimes we are just pursuing the wrong goal and losing track of the main goal. So item 1, what is the goal of the conversation? Think about that before you go into a difficult conversation. Item 2, when should you have the conversation? I think this is a really forgotten dimension of things. There are better times and worse times to have conversations. I think the first time I read about this was from John Gottman, the famous marriage scientist, who talks about how marriages work and how they fail, and how to communicate in marriages and so on. And I remember him writing about, pick your times. If you know your spouse is always grumpy when they come in the door, having driven through traffic at the end of a long day, this is a bad time to bring up one of your standard relationship problems. You can choose wisely about the time that will be most effective to have this particular conversation. So think about when to have this conversation. And I think sometimes the answer might be never. It might be there's never a good time for this particular conversation. What that really means is that this is a problem that we might not be able to solve with communication. But think hard about the when, and you can just dramatically increase your chances for success by picking the right time when the person is most conducive and most open to listening and being able to have that conversation. Maybe when they're well rested, when they're well fed, and when they don't have too much stress, when they don't have distractions, and so on. Third, who should have this conversation? Now, we ask this question in the healthcare system setting, when someone is harmed by healthcare, we think about who should go in and talk to the patient and family. Should it be the patient's doctor? Should it be some other doctor? Should it be one of the leaders of the hospital? Should it be a nurse? Who should it be? But I think in just our regular personal lives, this is a relevant question too. If we want to achieve some goal with another person, maybe you and that other person have a history which makes it very hard for them to listen to you or for you to raise this particular problem with them. So you can think to yourself, given this goal, who would be the best person to have this conversation? Who would be most likely to achieve the goal? And here we have to really let go of a lot of personal stuff when we're trying to, if we focus on the goal, which is how you have to be if you want to be an effective communicator. You have to focus on the goal and be practical and rational about it. Then sometimes we might think, this is my goal. I want this other person to do this thing or to grant this request or something. And if the request comes from me, because of our history, they're not going to grant it, or they're not even going to be able to hear it, or we have so much other baggage that's going to get in the way. Maybe another person could ask the exact same thing and the request could be granted. And if what we want is for the request to be granted, then it shouldn't matter who asks. We should pick the person to ask who has the best chance of being successful. So the third item is, who should have the conversation? Number 4, what questions do you anticipate getting? This is very important in a healthcare setting. Patients and families are likely to have a lot of questions, and you want to prepare for them. You don't want to go into a meeting with a family who's just been harmed, and then they have an obvious question about what happened, and you don't have the answer. You're going to look bad. The same thing is true in personal and business conversations. If you go in to talk to your boss or to a colleague about an important matter at work, you have to anticipate what are their questions going to be. Maybe you have a proposal for a new business venture, or you want to get promoted, or you want to transfer, or you want to lead a new project. They're going to have questions. Many questions are going to flow logically from the situation. You should write down those questions and have answers to them. And if you don't have answers to some of them, you might want to postpone the conversation until you do, or you might want to have a very good response prepared when they ask you that question. So our experience is many questions are sort of obvious. They're inherent in the situation. They're easy to anticipate. And with a little preparation, you can anticipate most of the questions that will arise and then be prepared to answer them. And that will make a difficult conversation much easier if you seem prepared to answer the questions that are likely to arise. So that's number 4. What questions you anticipate getting, prepare those answers. Number 5, one of the most important elements. What emotions do you anticipate in the other person? And how will you plan to name them and validate them and deal with them? So I've talked a lot about empathy in previous videos, and I'll put a little tag up above in the video where it links to some of those empathy videos. But one of the things you have to do in preparing for a difficult conversation is ask yourself, what are the emotions going to be? Emotions are fairly logical outcomes of certain situations. Certain situations are likely to produce anger, others produce sadness, others awe or gratitude or happiness or surprise or frustration, whatever it is. So a simple analysis of the situation and our own intuition about emotions makes it fairly obvious which emotions are likely to arise in this difficult conversation. And in fact, if we anticipate that the conversation is going to be difficult, it's often because we know certain emotions are going to arise in that interaction. So we have to do the homework before the conversation to identify those emotions and think about how we are going to name them and validate them, because I think this is the most effective empathic way of dealing with people's emotions, is to hear them and to validate them, and even to talk about why it's valid for them to have those emotions. And if they're strong negative emotions, you have to be prepared to bear those and carry the weight of those emotions. So think about the emotions people are having and be prepared to name them and validate them when they come up. 6th, maybe the most obvious thing, but we find it's extremely important and helpful. What are you going to say? Sometimes we think we go into an interaction and we think we know in the abstract what we're going to say. I'm going to go in there, and so a lot of the situations I study demand, empathy. So I ask someone, I give them a situation, I ask them what they would say, and they might say something. They would describe the general action they would take. Say, I would respond empathically. Well, okay, that sounds great. That's a description of what you would do, but I want to know what you would actually say. And what we find is that people often don't know exactly what they're going to say until they try to say it. And so we recommend that you practice with a friend, or even just practice in the mirror or practice in front of a video camera. Practice saying the actual words. And what we find is that when people practice saying the actual words, the first couple of times they say it, they don't know what they're going to say, or they say totally the wrong thing. There's things that they tell themselves, well, don't say this, don't say this. And then in the moment, that comes out of their mouth. But if you practice a few times, actually saying the words, not thinking it through, like having notes and thinking it through, but actually saying the words out loud to a friend in a role play, or to yourself in the mirror, or to yourself in a videotape, you will be so much more effective when the actual event comes up, because you will have rehearsed and said these words. And if you're stuck not knowing what to say, we often find a difficult conversation when they try to actually say the words, they're stuck. They don't know what to say. And so it takes practice or help from a friend or coaching or something like that to figure out what to say. So practice exactly what you're going to say by saying it, role play, videotape, etc. Number 7, what information should be shared or discussed? So this is especially relevant in a healthcare setting, maybe a little bit less so in an interpersonal setting, but we have to think about, there's a lot of information in a situation which might be relevant to share. We have to pick and choose. People often, there's that joke, TMI, too much information. This is what we say when people have chosen badly. They tell us too much information. It's not relevant. It's not appropriate. It might be offensive. It might be distracting. So in any given situation, certain information will be relevant to share and other information will not be, or might be relevant to share in writing or share at a later date. So ask yourself, what information is relevant to share, and share that. Don't share anything more. So number 8, actually I have only 9 steps. I promised 10, I only have 9. So number 8, how will you handle ongoing communication about this task? And who will handle ongoing communication about this task? So the thing about a difficult conversation is it's not normally a single event. Again, this is something we learn when we teach health professionals how to talk to patients and families, but it's true in other business situations as well. Let's say we want to have a conversation with our boss or with a colleague about leading a project. It's not likely to all be settled in one conversation. There's going to be one conversation where we bring it up, and there's going to be a whole series of conversations, maybe extending over months or even years, depending on the project. So think about how you're going to handle ongoing communication, and then plan for that. And then during the difficult conversation, explain your plan for how you're going to handle ongoing communication, how you're going to handle follow-up, and who's going to handle follow-up. Maybe it will be you, maybe it will be a colleague or a staff member or someone else on your team. If it's in a family situation, maybe another member of the family. But think about ongoing communication about this difficult topic and how it's going to be handled, and explain to the other person what the plan is. And the 9th and final element in our checklist is how are you going to take care of yourself before and after this difficult conversation? In the context of healthcare communication, we often think about if a patient has been harmed by healthcare, the doctors or nurses who were present when that mistake and the harm happened are often traumatized. So we ask ourselves, how are we going to take care of those traumatized caregivers? In an interpersonal or a business situation, these difficult conversations we call them difficult for a reason, because they're taxing, they're emotionally draining, they're even traumatizing for us depending on how difficult they are. So we have to ask ourselves, how are we going to care for ourselves before these conversations? And that's about picking the time. We shouldn't have these conversations when we're totally stressed. We should try to be well rested, well fed, and so on and so forth. We should have enough time and privacy to have the interaction and so on. But then we also have to think about how are we going to take care of ourselves after the difficult conversation. Maybe who will we debrief with? If this is at work, we can find a trusted colleague or our team to debrief with. If it's at home, we'd have a sibling or a family member or a parent or a friend or even a member of the clergy or a therapist, something like that, who will talk the situation over with you, and you can debrief and think about what went well, what didn't go well. You can process your own emotions that you were maybe having to control and regulate during the conversation. You can process those afterwards. So there are 9, I'm sorry I promised you 10. There are 9 items on this checklist for difficult conversations that I think if you follow this checklist before, during, and after a difficult conversation, it enormously increases the probability that you'll be successful. And these difficult conversations are all around us. They occur in our families, in our personal relationships, at work, and so on. And a little planning, thoughtful analysis will dramatically improve your probability for success. So please give this checklist a try next time you have a difficult conversation. Tell me how it works. Please subscribe to our channel, or consider subscribing to our channel. This is the kind of content we produce. If it's useful to you, please consider subscribing. Consider giving us a like below. And if you like this kind of content, go over to howcommunicationworks.com and sign up for our mailing list, so we'll make sure we can stay in touch with you and notify you when we have new content available and other good opportunities for you. So thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.